Current state of PlayStation in 2025 is honestly, well, kind of sad. Instead of getting a steady supply of exclusives like we have in the past, PlayStation has mostly let third parties do the talking while also focusing on failed live service projects like the apparent God of War live service game from Bluepoint, another big canceled live service project from Days Gone Studios' Sony Bend, and other blatant slaps in the face like the colossal failure of Concord. It's just really disappointing to see how much time and energy has been wasted on live service during this generation when we could have had a Bloodborne remake from Bluepoint and a Days Gone 2 from Sony Bend. And with other live service projects still on the way like Bungie's Marathon and Gummy Bears and Haven's Fair Games, it almost seems like PlayStation has lost the understanding of why players fell in love with the PlayStation brand in the first place. In the past, the reason that people were drawn to PlayStation was for the first-party, single-player, AAA experiences that outmatched any of the competition by a long shot. On the PlayStation 4, we had Uncharted 4, The Last of Us Part 2, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, Ratchet & Clank, Detroit Become Human, Spider-Man, The Last Guardian, Horizon Zero Dawn, Days Gone, and dare I even say, The Order 1886. On the PlayStation 2, we had even more exclusives than that, and yet, on the PlayStation 5, we had a set of games that all released on PlayStation 4 as well, making the whole set of PS5 games that we got appear much less impressive than they probably should have. In terms of true PS5 exclusives that have not also been released on PS4, PC, or some other platform, we only really have Astro Bot, Demon's Souls, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Stellar Blade, and some smaller and more controversial titles like Destruction All-Stars. Now, is it a matter of greed, or is it a lack of competition that has made PlayStation this way? Well, with Xbox trying to be the next Netflix for gaming, and with Xbox porting all of their biggest first-party games to the PlayStation in 2025, Sony seems to care less and less each year about the number of exclusives arriving on the PS5. Instead, they seem to focus on just a few huge AAA games that just take a really long time to make. I mean, at this point, we pretty much know the roadmap for the rest of the PlayStation 5 lifecycle. We know that we're getting Ghost of Yotei this year. We also know that we're maybe getting a Venom spin-off game from Insomniac, if the leaks are to be believed. And then we're getting Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet and Insomniac's Wolverine game. Those all sound like amazing games. It's just a shame that it takes so extremely long to get games like those out nowadays. And while the gaming market has reportedly remained fairly stagnant over the past few years, with companies hoping for price increases in video games across the board, that is starting with GTA 6, we have to ask ourselves whether the industry is going through financial problems or whether they're just enduring problems of their own making. And with so many games out there that have 100-hour plus completion times, it's literally impossible to make time to play even half the big games that come out these days. So why not limit the development time, keep the $70 price tag, and just make games that are around the 15 to 20 hour mark or even less? That would solve a lot of problems, including the problem with the lack of exclusives and the lengthy development times. Consumers these days are getting burned out on enormous experiences though, and consumers are getting burned out on live service, which unfortunately is the trend that Sony jumped on a few years ago and never really let up on. My fear is just that the PlayStation 6 will have even fewer exclusives, especially with Xbox adopting the approach of a third-party games publisher. I mean, what incentive is there going to be for PlayStation to get their big exclusive games out the door? After Naughty Dog releases Intergalactic, is it going to be another 10 years before we see a new game from Naughty Dog? After Ghost of Yotei is released, will we have to wait until the 2030s before we see anything else from Sucker Punch? The development times with games has just become so egregious that it's also worrying when certain pinnacle franchises get ignored for years. It just seems like there is chronic mismanagement of video game franchises these days. Take a look at Bethesda Game Studios with the Fallout and Elder Scrolls series, for example, each of which we haven't truly seen for more than a decade at this point. But other companies are just the same. I mean, it's been over a decade now since we saw the last Grand Theft Auto game, and even the last true Mario Kart. Meanwhile, other prominent gaming franchises have literally died over the last 10 or 15 years, like Splinter Cell, Star Fox, and Uncharted, While gaming companies take forever on other less inventive and less interesting AAA experiences, look what happened with Dragon Age of the Veilguard, for instance, where we had BioWare reboot the series internally multiple times over the period of 10 years before we got the worst Dragon Age game of all time, which didn't hit sales markers and now has forced BioWare into a sub 100 person development team for the next Mass Effect. My point is that if this same philosophy continues to be applied across the board in video games industry, even with first-party titles, then we better hope that third parties deliver, especially next generation when Xbox will clearly no longer focus on exclusives and where PlayStation won't really prioritize their exclusives as much since they won't really even have that much incentive to do so. As much as people hate to discuss exclusivity and console wars, the truth is that competition is really important in any market, and if the only company that will have regular exclusives is Nintendo, well, again, let's just hope that third parties really deliver for PlayStation. But what are your thoughts? If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and let me know what you're thinking down in the comments below. Are you disappointed with this generation's exclusive PlayStation games? Is it truly a sad state of things for modern PlayStation? And what do you hope out of the next generation of PlayStation whenever that time arrives? Anyhow, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next level.